Hi, how you going? Just a bit of a rundown on Donald Trump. Um, he was elected in 2016. It was a surprise for everyone that he was elected. Ever since then, from 2016 to the elections in 2020, Donald Trump has been vilified, berated, demeaned in an attempt to destroy him and what he stands for. And that's a good question in a sense, or an area that wants to be just briefly covered. What he did stand for. Donald Trump stood for, and people may have heard this, America first. And what he meant by that was he wanted to reintroduce and promote manufacturing in America to give blue-collar workers a job. He wanted to move away from the Wall Street Democrat centered, Chinese-centered direction, where people in Wall Street were making lots of money from companies moving to China to give the Chinese jobs and obviously to take advantage of cheaper labour within China. And what it's done, it's reduced the manufacturing capacity of America, and that's what he wanted to change. He wanted America to get out of protracted wars, i.e. Afghanistan, Iraq, because they've been involved in that for nearly 20 years in those countries, fighting, an internal cause that will never be resolved by an outside force. He moved away from the involvement with the Turkish Kurds ISIS scenario, because ISIS has been defeated. The Kurds who were fighting the Turks, and as Donald Trump said, they've been fighting for 100 years and over, really since, it goes back before 1923 when Turkey became a new state. The division and conflict between those two groups has been going on way before then. The Turkish used to call the Kurds Mountain Turks. Anyway, ISIS was defeated and Donald Trump left, pulled troops out of that region, which is a good thing because, once again, a third party is not going to solve these sort of situations. He also wanted to protect the southern border from illegal immigration. Nothing wrong with that. He's got nothing against immigration, but he wanted to control the southern border from illegal immigration, from people bringing over drugs, people smuggling young children in, because an unaccompanied child, if they get across the border, gets a 3-year visa and an education. So there's an incentive to try and plop your child over. Also to, people coming over the border and birthing children, illegal immigrants birthing children within the American state, and subsequently that child becomes an American citizen. They have millions upon millions of illegal immigrants. They're not refugees. They're abandoning their own country and they're going to America for the dream. And they want to impose that, that dream really on working Americans by working in America at a lower wage rate, and subsequently Americans who really need the money anyway, the poor people, the low-income workers, they suffer even more. He wanted to do that. He wanted to change trade arrangements between, say, for example, the American-Mexican-Canadian trade agreement, to get a better deal for America. He wanted to, and he did, renegotiate trade deals with Japan, which is a good thing. And the Democrats in America, who control the House of Representatives, were determined to destroy him. The incompetent, senile, neurotic Nancy Pelosi, who's Speaker of the House, was determined to constantly challenge Donald Trump, tried to destroy him, indicated to him that he was an imposter. And so what they did, along with the mainstream media, who absolutely despised the man, by calling him a bigot, a racist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, transphobic. All these things are not true. They're not true because he demonstrated that he wants to help all Americans. He wants to help African Americans. He wanted to help Latino Americans. Now, these people have had, under Donald Trump, the highest employment rate. I don't think with the black community, it's the best employment rate for over 50 years. These are accomplishments. But of course, the Democrats, who just think there's an endless pool of money, disagreed with him, confronted him. Nancy Pelosi, who is the Speaker of the House, as I just mentioned before, invites him every year to give the State of the Union address. And rather than showing respect for the office, she demeaned him in the second, in one of the last State of the Union address that he made. She tore up, the speech. I mean, that's how childish and pathetic she is. And the Democrats, are, as an organisation, are completely not connected with the American people. They love everything that he doesn't like, or maybe that's not really the case, but because he didn't, he's not narcissistic. He gives his salary to some charity. He's got enough money anyway. And if you hear Donald Trump, I mean, I know, you might see him on the occasion on TV, and he might say something, say, with regards to the, what was that, race riot in Charlottesville, that, there's some good people on one side and there's good people on both sides. If you fully actually listen to the speech there, he condemns, the Ku Klux Klan. He condemns white nationalism. But also to America's changing in a big way. Now the left, if you want to call it the left, which are made up of people who, groups like Antifa, made up of, a strong, transgender community that includes gays and lesbians and trans people, whatever, who are actually only 5% of the population. So there's this huge focus, and in Australia there's a huge focus, has been here for 20 years at least, on this small group. It initially started with gay people, and then it went to transgender people about rights, and the gays in Australia, they want to get married. Well, I've got nothing against a gay union, that's okay. But they bulldoze their way into wanting to use the word marriage, and I think they should find their own word. I think that's only reasonable. English is a language of expression. They could have developed a name, but they had to push into the marriage institution. Now, trans people, of course, aren't, they're male, female. You can't change your sex. That's the bottom line. But these people are extremely violent and determined to destroy Donald Trump. The filth that the American people have to endure from the mass media in America, the constant lies, the constant undermining of his policies and his direction, is a disgrace, because it ended up being really anti-American people. It was just because they despised the man, because they couldn't accept that he wasn't part of the establishment. He wasn't part of the Washington establishment. He's not part of the deep state. The deep state really is embraces institutions that are determined to undermine a legitimate government, and institutions like the Department of Justice, the Pentagon, trying to undermine a newcomer, a man with vision, a man with direction, and a man who made America, in a sense, great again, whatever you want to take from that. But he improved the positions of so many different groups. Now, when I did hear him on occasions where he was talking to people, for example, a group of people who had COVID-19 and had recovered, around this large wooden table, he was very, very decent. He was very open to listening to what people had to say. And he's done this with various different groups. He's not this bombastic character. He's not a man who's looking after himself as such. He had direction. He had an idea. He had a belief. The Democrats have nothing. They are just so, in a sense, woke, you know, that you can change the agenda. We want the flooding in of illegal migrants. They're not refugees, they're freaking migrants. And he really did improve the standing of all Americans, Donald Trump. He was new, he was different, but he was genuine. And promises made, promises kept. He was a man of great foresight. Now, the 2020 election has been completely rigged. He lost, you know, he's going to lose because of obstacles within the different states, to do with counting, to do with weighting votes, to do with flipping votes, using, you know, for example, the Dominion voting system, which had constant, during the election procedure, had constant internet access. Would have been quite easy, and the Dominion organisation would have been were able to give different, you know, able to give people access so they could make changes. This will never come out. I think it's a real shame for America, because what it really means, it undermines the whole democratic voting process, which has been undermined. So America is really, you know, lost out big, because voting doesn't work there. It's manipulated. It's pre-directed. And so he's going to be pushed out. Joe Biden, who can barely put a freaking sentence together, been, you know, a senator for 47 years, has done nothing. Vice president for 8, has done nothing. And what he's going to do now, he's going to give illegal immigrants 11 million of American citizenship. You know, where's the money coming from? What's the damage that's going to cause? No one knows. But America is really, you know, the loser in this. The American people are the big losers. You know, initially when COVID-19 came out, he did a limited restriction with China with regards to Chinese people coming into America. He was branded as being racist, xenophobic. The Democrats' approach is, what if he says, we're going to take the opposite view. So Nancy Pelosi, in those early stages, was seen down in Chinatown, you know, wanting people to come down. In New York, where they lost 33,000 people, Andrew Cuomo, who was the governor, signed a deal a year before COVID-19 arrived with some health organisations to grant them, you know, liability direction, or liability, liability, how do you say it? Not really too sure, but it gave them immunity from liability. So that if they brought someone that had suffered something from a pandemic, they weren't liable. And as a result, they were putting people with COVID-19 into nursing homes. 33,000 New York citizens died as a result. Now, that's a freaking disaster. But subsequently, he's been promoted as, because it did drop in New York, you know, COVID-19 spread. He's been touted as some COVID-19 superhero. You got to remember too, I mean, the New York health director was telling people when COVID-19 first entered New York, there was no problem. We want you to catch the taxis. We want you to use the underground, the subway, and go out to your favourite restaurant. So it didn't matter what he said. I mean, he initially said, you know, he didn't wear a mask because he had a position to uphold, and everyone who saw him was tested. He dealt with that. He said very early on, if people want to wear masks, do it. He was never anti-mask. And I just think it's a real shame for America that the Democrats had to freaking cheat, because they believe they're right. They believe the end justifies the means. So they will do they would do anything to destroy and destabilise the man. I mean, it's an absolute horrendous situation. You've got to remember too, he's the President of the United States. He's got executive powers, and there's a limitation on that. With regards to states, for example, in Portland, if there was, you know, riots, or Minnesota when there were riots, you know, people burning shops, looting, all, you know, under the eyes of, you know, Black Lives Matter. That's what initially started. Remembering, of course, that blacks kill more blacks per year than police officers kill blacks per year. It would take the American police officer 40 years to get to that yearly total that black shooting black entails. And the police that do shoot blacks, they're black. They're more black officers killing blacks than white officers killing blacks. So there's no racist innuendo. Obviously, there's some bad cops here and there. We have them in Australia too, the bad people in any society. And you got to remember too, America's a very dangerous country in the sense that a lot of people have guns, so it's a different scenario, whatever. Donald Trump, he wanted to introduce, I don't know if it actually went through, the platinum plan to, give African Americans in small business an opportunity by spending $500 million over 4 years to try and raise them to a level. Also, too, I've just got to say this: it is a cultural, aspect to this. It's not, the black people. There's some good black people and some very intelligent black people. I'm not a racist, but in the end, really, it's got nothing to do with race, and it's got everything to do with culture. The black community has a huge problem with. If you hear people like Candace Owens saying that, Black Lives Matter is not the issue. The important issues are with African Americans is the literacy rate is low, the education for black people is low, and so that's a problem. The black people have a huge issue with fatherless mothers. In the sense of single African American women not having a partner, that's as high as 70%. It's over 70%. It's a cultural thing. In the 60s, during the civil rights movement, that figure was about 20%. It's gone up to over 70. So that's a huge problem. You simply cannot play the victim, or some people obviously do, because there's some leverage in that. To play the victim, that they've got to really sort themselves out. There's certainly no easy solutions, and the Democrats are going to be no solution. I mean, Kamala Harris, she's a real piece of work, that woman. And I mean, during the election campaign, Joe Biden was basically in bed by 10 a.m. in the morning. Because he was too tired, he's too old, and he can't really say much because he's too stupid in the end, because he's got no vision, no direction, no understanding. He's really a bad individual. He's a corrupt individual. Hunter Biden's a little corrupt shit. Problems in the Ukraine, not investigated. Problems with Russia, not investigated. With Hunter Biden and the Biden clan, Jim Biden, Joe Biden, and Hunter Biden all making money off the Russians, off the Ukrainians, off, corruption. And I think that's a real shame. I think America's really fooled itself. And I was really surprised, really. I mean, if the election was fair, Donald Trump would have won. Over extreme odds, over 4 years of being absolutely condemned by the media. It's absolutely disgraceful. And I do admire the American people, because I think how you stood up and you were able to push that all aside after 4 years of being bombarded with lies and falsehoods. The propaganda machine of the mainstream media couldn't hold Americans back. The only way the Democrats could win the election was to cheat, and that's what they did. That's what they've done. And the system now has failed. The lies are everywhere. Of course, the Australian media particularly, goes along with, he lost. There's no evidence to this. Crap. There's evidence everywhere, but it's not going to be presented. It's not going to get to the Supreme Court, because the state legislators will block this. I just do want to say, though, and I sort of touched on it before, but I didn't really finish, with regards to the presidency. And I'm sure people know this, but the president is elected, and I mentioned before Portland and Minnesota riots and stuff. He can't send to the National Guard to stop that. He has to be asked by the governor of the state for assistance. He can't impose his will on the states. He can't do that. It's constitutionally illegal. And you got to remember, I mean, I know Australia's a different situation. You know, in Australia, the House of Representatives, that's the house of the government. In America, it's not. The House of Representatives is a legislative body, like in Australia, but they don't have any government connections in that sense. They're not the government. They just enact and create legislation, which is passed, you know, by the Senate and signed by the president. So Donald Trump was dealing with 50 different states when it came to the COVID-19 problem. He can't impose his will, he can only make suggestions, he can offer programs, he can offer assistance, but the states have to ask for it. I mean, 5 states that are run by Democrat governors accounted for 40% of the COVID-19, you know, victims. And remember too, the Americans are a little bit different to us in Australia, is that they do have this very strong sense of liberty, of freedom, and a lot of them are very distrustful of the federal government to begin with, and so they don't want to be told what they should be doing. But I think really the COVID-19 epidemic in America, I mean, Donald Trump possibly could have done a better job. He could have possibly continued with his daily talks about COVID-19 and updates and getting health officials in to come in and discuss, which he initially did. But it is in the end up to the governors really to try and control, like they've done in Australia here. All the states have done really well in controlling COVID-19 because, like I'm from Victoria, we had a lockdown. Now every Victorian, or most Victorians, 99% of them accepted the lockdown was for their benefit, to stop the spread, to stop the death, and we abided by that. And we're pretty well eradicated in Victoria. You know, it's a remarkable recovery. At one stage, we had 720 people affected every day. We stopped it because we did the lockdown. In America, it's different. They're confronted by Americans who will not be told what to do, and also the inadequate response by American governors. So they have to be held accountable. They never will be, because they'll just blame Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is a remarkable individual. Well, I do remember, you know, when he ran that show, The Apprentice and whatever, and I really thought he was a bit of a dickhead. I've got to say, I never liked him at all. And I never liked him really when he first decided to run for president. And I did see him after he won the election in 2016, the speech he made was off the cuff. And I thought, you know, they're really nice, good things he said here. He said things like he wanted to improve the infrastructure of America, you know, the roads and whatever. That was one thing, and he wanted to bring jobs back to America. I thought, okay, we'll see how he goes here. And you hear his talk sometimes. I'm not talking about his rallies because he's a bit of a reformer. That's okay. But I used to hear him sometimes outside the White House or outside his helicopter when it landed, talking to the media. And I thought he was really, really good, really articulate. He was informed. He had detail. Very intelligent man. I think he really grew into the job over 4 years. I think he did a really remarkable job. You've got to bear in mind that the media were constantly, you know, harassing him over ridiculous ideas and with ridiculous questions, which was so divorced from really what was occurring. They were never talking about his accomplishments. They were always trying to run him down with nasty, condescending, berating questions. It was a freaking disgrace. I mean, these people, the select group, you know, controlling Americans and the way they think and the information they receive, absolutely horrendous. They have a lot to answer for. You know, journalism doesn't exist. They don't investigate. They just have a narrative. They just push that narrative of negativity to try and undermine him, to present him in a bad light, not to respect his office, which is a disgrace. People like Caitlin Collins, you know, from CNN, these are the main culprits, you know, Morning Joe, you know, that Donald Trump's destroying America. I think, the economy in America is going really well. I think, why do you say that? Well, where's your evidence? Donald Trump's a racist. He's not a fucking racist. That's just ridiculous. But this is the simplicity of the media and of the left in general. I mean, of course, The left are bigots because they do not tolerate anyone else with a different opinion. If you don't agree with them, they want to fucking destroy you. So if you've got something against transgender people, not against them, but you don't agree with the idea that people can just change their sex, you're earmarked. They will destroy you on social networking. They want you to get sacked. They're the most nefarious group within American society, and they have pushed America down. And now we're going to get Joe Biden and Kamala Harris running the country, or running the federal government, and I think it's a real shame. Anyway, that's my two, Bob.